Well, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you, Dan Brocklebank. You're head of UK operations, I think.
That's correct, director, yeah.
Director of UK operations. And I'd like to talk to you first of all about your background. So how did you come to Orbis in the first place?
Sure, and thanks, Ron, good to meet you too. So my background, actually, I qualified as a chartered accountant in the late 1990s, making me feel old here. But I was always interested in the stock market, and I watched from afar the tech bubble come and go. I was looking for an explanation for that, and I was looking for a way to pursue that hobby of mine as a career. And I came across Orbis in late 2000 and 2001. And what I discovered in the organisation was an investment philosophy which explained how the tech bubble could happen. But also, at least as importantly, in the organisation, I found a business that had been able to survive that period. Because it's easy to forget now how many organisations just didn't make it through, either because they abandoned their investment philosophy or because they were taken out and they went through difficulties. So I joined in January 2002, so I've been with Orbis for 15 years now. Most of the time I was part of the investment team, but as of last year I took over responsibility for the UK, and so now I'm working with our retail and institutional clients.
Okay, so let me just explain how I came across your company.
Okay, yeah.
One of the people that watches our YouTube videos actually said to me, yes, I only invest in passive funds. These are the very cheap tracker funds,
yeah,
which have no kind of stock selection or human involvement at all. They just track markets. The only fund I have is with Orbis.
Okay.
And the reason why is because they only charge you a fee if they outperform the benchmark. So you're the only active fund manager he could find which would do that. And I didn't believe it. I said, no, that's impossible. So I actually looked it up on the website. It was true. I just couldn't believe it.
That's great. Please send him our thanks. Delighted to hear that's resonated, and that's great to hear.
So how on earth did he convince the company that they should have this fee structure where you only get paid if you outperform?
Right. Okay. It's quite a long story, and I should first of all say, it wasn't me. It was not my idea. I haven't convinced anyone. But I think perhaps just stepping back a little bit, the way we've built Orbis has always been about putting our investment performance first. And that may sound a bit perverse to some of your viewers or your readers, but in the industry, the overwhelming incentive is to get bigger, because most people are paid as a percentage of the amount of funds that they manage.
So if you have $1 billion in your fund, you earn 1% of that $1 billion every year. Whether you perform or you don't.
And regardless of performance. So it's a bit of a head scratcher when you think about it. And so if you want to increase, in that situation, if you want to increase your revenues by 5% in a year, you can either go to the fund manager and say, well, I want an extra 5% performance out of your portfolio. And most of them will turn around and look at you and go, what on earth? Don't be crazy, I'd love that. That's what I'm trying. Or you can go to your marketing team and say, actually, why don't you go and hire another person, and can you just sell a few more funds? And maybe they'll say, well, could you start another fund then, because this is selling very well at the moment. Yeah. So it's much easier in the industry to grow your asset base than it is to generate that extra performance. And our founder, Alan Gray, who set all this up in 1989, he was determined to make sure, as an organisation, we would never lose sight of performance. So right from the outset, all of our fee structures have been performance geared, with the goal being that we can only thrive as an organisation and even survive in the very long term if we're generating value for our clients. And that's what gets us excited within the organisation. So now how do we come up with the fee structure for the UK? Well, we only started offering our services to retail investors in the UK about 3 years ago.
So this is Orbis Direct?
This is Orbis Access.
Orbis Access, which is a website so that anyone in the UK can... It's a direct website. It's the same firm as Orbis Investments. It's just the website is branded at the moment under Orbis Access. So before that, you just sold directly to fund managers. So you were the fund manager for fund managers?
The vast majority of our clients before then were institutions, so pension funds, maybe large insurance companies or endowments, or very high net worth individuals. And they came direct to us through a number of different ways. But they're spread around 50 different countries, so we really are a global company. We have a global client base. And so when we said we'd like to do something in the UK because we think there's a need for our services, we can talk about that if you like, but we wanted to try and say, is there something we can do with the fee structure when we set up the vehicles in the UK that might be a real differentiator for us to try and take this principle of aligning our interests with our clients to the next level. And as you mentioned in your introduction, the question there, one of the trends we see at the moment is a significant push towards passive investing, tracker funds. And actually, I would hands up, I think for most people that is a very sensible thing to do.
You can't say that.
Well, I can because it is. I mean, I can't deny the logic. On average, we talk about on average, fund managers are the market. It's a zero-sum game fund managers are dealing in, and active managed funds must charge higher fees than passive funds, because passive funds are basically a computer running in the background. And so on average, the experience of investors in active managed funds must be less than the experience of investors in passive funds. And this is the dilemma we're all faced with. So we recognise that this shift is going on, and in many ways we think it's sensible. At the same point in time, we passionately believe that there's a role for active management. There's an ability for certain fund managers thinking correctly to add value for their clients over long periods of time. We've been at this for 27 years now, and the Global Equity Fund, which is our flagship fund, has outperformed after all fees and expenses by a bit less than 4% per annum. So that makes a big difference. It doesn't sound like much, but it makes a big difference when you compound that over
4%
time.
4% long term?
4% per annum over 27 years makes a massive difference. So we recognise passive investments growing, but we passionately believe in active management, and we think that our philosophy, most importantly, but also the way we built the firm, has been set up deliberately to ensure we can keep doing that. So we said, well, how can we put something in place that helps bridge that gap for UK retail potential investors? And so the fee structure we came up with, in essence, produces the situation which is that if all we do is perform in line with the benchmark, produce the same returns as a tracker fund, we will not get paid a fee. Our fee is performance only. If we do outperform, then we share in that outperformance. But if we then subsequently underperform, those performance fees are refunded. And as you wrote in your blog, it's a little bit like the 7 fat years and 7 lean years. So there is a stabilizing mechanism in that fee structure. But the most important thing is that it aligns our interests with those of our clients. And clients can know that we can only do well if they do well. And that's the thing that we feel most passionately about.
So your incentives are aligned with those of your investors, which is very unusual. And also you talk about it as a symmetric fee structure.
Yeah.
So symmetric means that if you make a gain, you get a higher fee. If you make a loss, or if you underperform the benchmark, rather, you lose that. You lose your fee.
Yes. So there are a couple of angles to it, which perhaps if you just want to get a little bit more detail. So firstly, active funds tend to charge fees or pass on expenses in a number of different ways. So the first thing to say is that our ongoing charges ratio is 0%. As a manager, we've chosen to absorb all of the costs of actually running the vehicles, the legal costs, the admin costs. Those are typically passed on to investors in those funds. So actually, if all we do is track the index, we'll be out of pocket. Yeah. So it's a little bit more extreme than I mentioned a little bit earlier. So firstly, we absorb that. So the ongoing costs are generally 0%. If we outperform in exchange for that, if we outperform, we share in 50% of that outperformance. So if the market stays flat and our fund goes up by let's say 4%, 2% will get charged as a performance fee. Now, importantly, that doesn't get paid to us straight away. It gets paid into a reserve which sits in between us and the clients. If in the second year we subsequently underperform, and let's assume in this year we underperform by 2%, so maybe the market goes up by 2% and we stay flat, then half of that underperformance, so half of 2%, i.e. 1%, will flow back from the reserve into the fund to refund clients. So at the end of the period,
we would have outperformed by 1%, but there'll still be 1% in the reserve. Now, I've simplified that to a certain extent because we can crystallize some fees when there is some fee in the reserve, but we've capped that crystallization rate. And what that means is that our incentives are importantly not just to outperform in the short term, but to outperform over long periods of time and to sustain that outperformance. Because only if we can generate long performance over long periods that we can actually crystallize those and get paid those performance fees in cash.
But there's also this thing about you don't take, so you essentially you get paid out of this slush fund, this kind of reserve fund. But if you go below a certain high watermark, you don't get paid.
So what happens is if we outperform, or let's just say from day one, if we underperform, then we wouldn't charge any performance fees. And we have to recover that underperformance before we can start charging performance fees again. So we call that a reserve recovery mark. That's reasonably common in the idea of a high watermark is reasonably common in the industry. And what it does is it prevents us charging for the same outperformance twice. Basically.
So kind of double charging.
That's right.
Okay. So how does this feed through to the actual compensation of your managers, and how do you find managers who have the magic touch which can actually generate outperformance, or alpha as we call it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like a faith now, isn't it? Believing in alpha, believing in outperformance. It must be really hard to find fund managers who can consistently outperform over the long term.
It is. And I would say I think it's harder for people to select managers than it is for managers to select stocks. Because when you're sitting there picking stocks, you've got a whole load of audited information that goes back often for 20, 30, 40 years. You can go and test the products out. You can see it in real time. With managers, you're sat there and you don't always get all the information you want or should perhaps even have. So it is a difficult job selecting managers. The way we approach our investment team is actually driven by what our long-term mission is as a firm. And our long-term mission is to empower our clients by enhancing their savings and wealth. And for most people when they're saving and investing, the one thing we recognize is that if we're going to do that really well, we have to do that over long periods of time. Because we're really in the business of harnessing compound interest. And compound interest is a very, very powerful force. It's one that humans often underestimate because our brains tend to think in linear terms. But for us to do that as an organisation, we have to do it over long periods of time. And the time frame is longer than most people's investment career. And so we need to think not just about producing those investment returns this year, next year, or even 5 years down the line. We need to think 15, 20 years down the line. And so the global fund today is the product of 6 specialists or 6 people's stock recommendations. But our investment team as a whole has about 45 people in it. And it's way more than we need at the moment. And really what we're doing is bringing people into the investment team who have a passion for stock picking, who we think might be good, and most importantly, they don't have the proven expertise, but they have the character sets that we think are likely to be successful long term. They work within the investment team, and they actually make recommendations, but those recommendations don't have any impact on the actual client's portfolio. And you may say, why on earth do you do that? That sounds ridiculous. You've got all these people working away. But what it gives us, and the most important, the reason we do it, is it gives us a rich data set. And we can see of these people who join our investment team, we can assess them over long periods of time and say, are they demonstrating any skill in terms of making investment recommendations? And what that enables us to do is spot the next generation of stock pickers. And when we find somebody, we can gradually give them more authority and more responsibility. And in that way, we're looking to build a team that can organically sort of replace itself over long periods of time. So we have the informational edge because we're sitting internally, we can see why they made the recommendation, were they right, and were they right for the right reasons? So you can be lucky in investing, were they right for the right reasons? And when we find those people, we're very excited, but we can give them a great working environment and lots of responsibility in the future. To use a sporting analogy, everyone loves a good sporting analogy. Much of the investment industry is run on what I call the Tiger Woods model.
Yeah.
You know, the firms are built around a star player. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. There are some extremely talented people out there, and Tiger was an extremely talented golfer.
Or we could say Woodford.
I'm not naming any names. This is not about naming. This is approach towards building a firm.
Yeah.
And Tiger Woods was fantastic at golf, but you know, as we all know, his career came to a rather abrupt end for reasons I don't think anyone could have, from the outside, could have predicted.
Yeah.
And so investors in that fund, in a fund that's run like that, have this dilemma of going, ooh, is this person genuinely enduring? We liken our approach to a team like Barcelona Football Club. They may not always be top. They may not be the best football club in the world every year, but they are consistently very, very close to the top. And they put a lot of effort in identifying young people with potential and then drilling them and teaching them the Barcelona way so that they can develop into the superstars of the future. And that's what we're trying to do. So for us, it's a team-based approach rather than an individual approach. We think it's best for clients, and it's the way we think we're most likely to be able to harness that magic power of compounding over long periods of time.
And I just couldn't believe it when I saw your website, because there's a little box that talks about fees. And one of the fees that you mentioned is the transaction costs.
Yeah.
Now, there's no other fund manager I've found which is that honest and that transparent.
I'm surprised you say that. I haven't gone around and looked. I'm sure there are some that put that. I can't believe nobody else puts it out there. So just to be clear for your viewers, the transaction costs are the costs that we would spend on clients' behalf in buying and selling the shares in the fund. Now, I mentioned earlier that as a manager we bear some costs of running the fund. We don't bear the transaction costs. They are part of the purchase price of a share in our mind. But we need to think about it in the context of our fee structure. Because what's happening here is that we have the ability and the authority to incur expenses on behalf of our clients in buying and selling the shares. But our fee structure is driven by the performance that we generate. And because of that sharing ratio, it basically means that we are paying 50% of all of those transaction costs, because each of those transaction costs reduce the returns that the clients are having. So a lot of ink has been spilt over transaction costs, and I suspect it's going to feature in the FCA's report.
Yeah.
I personally don't think that layers and layers of regulation will fix the problem, because smart people will always find a way to do something silly or creative. The key thing as a client that I would like to see in any fund is to see that my interests are aligned with that fund manager. Because if I know that the investment manager's interests are aligned with mine, I know that they are directly incentivized to making sure, not that they pay zero, but that they get good value for money. And value for money is a critical thing. I think it's the aspect where our industry has struggled the most. And when you pay fixed fees regardless of performance, it's very hard to say you're always going to offer value for money. So that is what we're focused on. And our fee structure means that we are incentivized to keep those, to get the best value for money out of those transaction costs.
Okay. So maybe one thing to talk about finally is Vanguard, because I'll probably be talking to them later.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously they've just hoovered up a huge amount of capital because they track funds very cheap. They track indices very cheaply.
Yes.
So they've done an incredible job at keeping costs low.
Yeah.
And a lot of money's flowed into their company as a result. So as you say, assets under management is how much profit you make. So the bigger your pot, the more money you make. So as an active manager, competing with that flood of money coming out of active management, do you think other companies are going to adopt your fee structure?
I can't speak for other companies. I have heard a few people mention that the use of performance fees is going up. And anecdotally, we've had some inquiries from other managers, but I don't know what other people are going to do. What I would say is, firstly, we have a lot of respect for Vanguard. I think it's a very impressive firm. But I don't think I wouldn't see us as in competition with them. They're offering a fundamentally different product. They're saying, We will get you the average market return at the lowest cost possible. And as I said right at the beginning, I think for many people that's a very sensible strategy. We think we can produce superior performance when measured over long periods of time. It's not consistent, but over long periods of time we think we can outperform. And we're happy to be paid only if we're successful in that regard. So in many ways, I think our approaches are very complementary, and blending a core of your portfolio in passive tracker funds with one or two highly active, long-term focused investment managers, to me, makes a great deal of sense.
Okay. It's almost like building a cathedral, isn't it? The people who actually work in your company, they never actually see the completion. So when you think over those very long periods of time, it's almost like you're building a career, building something which you'll never see the completion of, because it's going to go on forever.
That's an interesting way of thinking about it. I would just say, when you work for an organisation that's been around for 27 years, you recognise that everything we're doing today, we're standing on the shoulders of the people who came before us. Our goal at Orbis is to build an enduring organisation, and the way for effectively partners in the business, people who share in the profits of the business, we are all incentivised, not just on how well the firm does while we're here, but for a training period after we've left, for 6 years after we've left. So my incentive is not just to make sure we do a good job today, but when I leave, or when I come to move on, I've left the firm in the best possible position for clients and for the people who come behind me. So yeah, it's a good analogy.
Incredible. Okay, well, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Ron.